I'm Peggy Pico. Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, Randy Duke Cunningham is a free man. The former San Diego congressman was released from prison today after serving nearly 7 years for accepting bribes. Plus, the ACLU files a class action lawsuit against the Department of Homeland Security, alleging immigration agents abuse the voluntary deportation process. And we'll show you why this underwater predator has caught the attention of San Diego divers. KPBS Evening Edition starts now.
KPBS Evening Edition is made possible by Joan and Erwin Jacobs and by
Good evening. I'm Peggy Pico. Thanks for joining us. After almost 7 years in prison, former California Congressman Randy Duke Cunningham is a free man. The 71-year-old was released from a halfway house in New Orleans today. Cunningham's 15 years in Congress ended after he admitted to accepting more than $2 million in bribes from defense contractors. Cunningham is a former Navy pilot and distinguished war veteran. His sentence is one of the longest prison sentences given to a Congress member. Prior to his conviction, Cunningham represented California's 50th district. The American Civil Liberties Union filed a class action lawsuit in Los Angeles today against the Department of Homeland Security. The suit alleges immigration agents used intimidation, deception, and coercion to pressure Mexican nationals into signing away their rights for an immigration hearing. The suit is part of a new project of the ACLU of San Diego and Imperial counties called the Border Litigation Project. At the helm of this new project is ACLU attorney Mitra Ibadolahi. Also joining us today is Aide Vasquez, a U.S. citizen whose husband is a plaintiff in the lawsuit. Welcome to you both.
Thank you for having us.
Mitra, let's start with this class action lawsuit that claims misinformation, deception, coercion to get people to sign away their rights, to sign this voluntary departure form. What is that form and what happens if you sign it?
A voluntary departure form gives certain immigrants the opportunity to leave the United States without going through a formal removal proceeding before an immigration judge. If elected voluntarily, if knowingly elected, it's a different way to leave the United States. When you sign the form, you can be expelled from the United States. You are supposed to have a period of time to put your affairs in order. Our plaintiffs were all expelled within a period of 24 hours.
Is it illegal to coerce? I understand the Supreme Court allows law enforcement to lie to people to get them to do things. Is it illegal to do this?
It's a violation of your due process rights to sign away your rights without it being knowing and voluntary. And so we allege that under the current practice as it exists here in Southern California, both of those requirements, it's neither knowing nor is it voluntary. People are signing away their rights without realizing what they're doing.
Well, the U.S. Department of Justice defines voluntary departure like this. If you have no way of lawfully remaining in the United States, voluntary departure is permission to leave the country in a way that has fewer negative consequences than being removed. But that's not what plaintiffs in the case are claiming. There weren't fewer consequences. And with me, Aide, your husband is one of the plaintiffs in this suit. Tell us what happened to him.
Well, he got pulled over in San Diego.
He was using the cell phone.
For talking to me on the cell phone, yes. And I found out where he was, and I arrived at the scene. And I guess the officer asked my husband for identification. And my husband obviously didn't have a California ID. And I guess the officer immediately suspected that my husband was illegal. And I arrived there and I told him, that's my husband. We've been married 7 years. We have 2 kids together. And I gave the officer my husband's full name. The officer's like, well, I can't take your word for it. I have to investigate myself.
At which point he took him in.
5 minutes later, Border Patrol arrived and took him.
And in a matter of 24 hours?
This was by 11 in the morning. By 2 in the morning, the next morning, he was out in TJ now.
He'd been deported?
He'd been deported.
Because he signed this voluntary form?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. He's in Tijuana now?
Yes.
And what's the impact of this been on your family?
For me, it's been very hard because I've had to see my kids go through so much. Like my son, for example, wouldn't eat, wouldn't sleep, would ask, where is dad at? Where I want him to come home, where's my dad? And my daughter as well, she would ask me, where is dad at? Where is he here yet? And I told him in a way that it wouldn't affect her so much. I told her there's some officers that won't let your dad come home. And she was like, well, what if I asked them to let dad come home? Would they let him? And I mean, what am I supposed to answer to that? It's a 6-year-old asking.
And right now he's in Tijuana, and you visit him often?
I visit him at least once a week. I mean, it's very economic-wise, it's very hard. And I have to be here to work.
Okay. You are a U.S. citizen. I want to make that clear.
Yes,
and he was not. Mitra, a lot of people think that people living in the U.S. Illegally don't have any rights. Do they have rights? And if so, what are they?
They do, yes. It's a misconception. People living in the United States without documentation pay taxes. They have many of the same responsibilities as citizens, and they also have many of the same rights, including the constitutional rights to due process, which attach to everyone in the United States, regardless of citizenship status. And that's one of the core rights that we believe is being violated through the voluntary departure system as it's being implemented in Southern California.
What do you hope, Mitra, comes of this lawsuit?
I hope that we can achieve a greater level of accountability and transparency for immigration enforcement authorities' practices at the border. I hope that we can ensure that immigrants who are presented with voluntary departure forms are provided the opportunity and the information necessary to completely understand the ramifications of signing those forms, to consult with attorneys and family members before signing any such forms, and to be sure that they are not intimidated or bullied or pressured in those very difficult situations where they are presented with those forms, so that they make a knowing and voluntary election one way or the other.
And Aida, your husband has to remain out of the country for how long?
10 years.
So 10 years. Was he aware of that when he signed this form?
No, he wasn't. We actually didn't learn about that till like a week and a half later when we met some of the ACLU staff.
So does he have any options at this point since he's signed the form?
One of the forms of relief that we're asking for, this is a class action for our individual plaintiffs and for those similarly situated, is that they be returned to the United States in the legal position that they would have been in prior to signing that form under false pretenses. So our hope is that he will be returned to his family much sooner than 10 years. But legally there is a 10-year ban that applies to anyone who's been in the United States unlawfully for over a year.
Okay, we will continue to follow this story. Thank you both so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement did not respond to our request for a comment on the ACLU lawsuit, but sent KPBS a short email saying, as a matter of policy, we don't comment on pending litigation. Firefighters are slowly getting a handle on a monster wildfire burning just north of Los Angeles. Evacuation orders were lifted in the Mojave Desert, where the Powerhouse Fire is still burning. 6 homes have been destroyed and more than 32,000 acres burned in that fire that began last Thursday. The fire is said to be 60% contained, with full containment by Monday. The cause of the blaze is under investigation. The former head of the Federal Nuclear Regulatory Commission said Southern California Edison's plan to restart San Onofre at 70% power does not inspire him with confidence. KPBS North County Bureau Chief Allison St. John attended a San Diego seminar where Greg Yasko spoke. Allison, Greg Yasko resigned from the NRC last year, so how important is his opinion on the restart plan?
Well, Yasko resigned under pressure, and many observers say it was because of his strong focus on safety at nuclear power plants as a top priority that made him unpopular at the regulatory agency. Today's seminar in San Diego in the County Supervisors' Chambers was organized by groups who are concerned about the proposal to restart one unit at San Onofre. Here's what Yasko had to say about that plan.
Just looking at it kind of as an outsider now, the approach that's being taken is not one that instills tremendous confidence in me, because the approach is for an operation at reduced power. In principle, what you should see is design modifications and changes that allow operation at the licensed power levels.
In other words, a fix. Yasko also called for a new approach to measure risk at nuclear power plants. He said the cost-benefit approach that says it isn't worth investing in something that's unlikely to happen means the nuclear industry is chronically underprepared for accidents like what happened at Fukushima.
Well, speaking of which, the man who is Japan's top elected official during the Fukushima meltdown was also at the seminar. What did he have to say?
Well, Naoto Kan said Fukushima changed him. Speaking through a translator, he said that he started out as a politician thinking he could control nuclear power. And he says he's now ashamed of promoting nuclear technology, and he believes society needs to work towards phasing it out altogether. And he cited the example of Germany. He called for groups who have questions about nuclear power to form an international network to stand up to the powerful interests that are promoting nuclear power.
Allison St. John, thank you for that update. And you can get full coverage of San Onofre on our website at kpbs.org. A Colorado judge has accepted an insanity plea from James Holmes, the former San Diego resident accused of killing 12 people in a Denver area movie theater back in July of 2012. The ruling sets the stage for an intensive mental evaluation of Holmes, which could take months. The judge also ruled the notebook Holmes sent to his therapist will be allowed as evidence in the trial. Prosecutors are seeking the death penalty. Thousands of health professionals held a rally in Sacramento today to protest a scheduled 10% cut in the Medi-Cal pay rate. KPBS health reporter Kenny Goldberg joins us with further details. And Kenny, why does the state want to cut pay for people who treat Medi-Cal patients?
Well, lawmakers made the decision back in 2011 when California was mired in its budget crisis. And at the time, doctors challenged the cuts in court, saying that it would hurt access to patients who have Medi-Cal. Well, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals just recently decided in favor of the state. So unless lawmakers reverse course, these cuts are going to go into effect.
But a lot of other state services have been cut over the last few years. So why shouldn't doctors and hospitals absorb their fair share?
Well, doctors and hospitals say the Medi-Cal pay rate is already so low that it doesn't even cover their costs. So to take 10% less than that makes the situation even worse for them.
What are the protesters at Capitol Hill today? What did they want to get out of the rally?
Well, they want to convince lawmakers to reverse these cuts or put them on hold. And in fact, there are some bills in the Assembly and the Senate that would do just that, but there hasn't been any action on them in the last few weeks. So the ralliers are hoping to get lawmakers to take care of business. All
right, KPBS health reporter Kenny Goldberg, thanks.
Thank you.
A large and opportunistic underwater predator captures the attention of San Diego divers because of a recent spike in the number of sevengill shark sightings this year. KPBS business and environment reporter Eric Anderson reports on the sharks that can reach a length of 11 feet.
This is a regular ritual for Rod Watkins. He lugs his diving gear to Scripps Park in La Jolla. This happens to be a crisp, clear morning above the water, and Watkins is hoping for the same below.
This is called the regulator. We'll put that on the tank to breathe. It's always good to have some way to breathe underwater.
Watkins runs Scuba San Diego, and he's dived here for nearly 5 decades. He says the sevengill sharks used to be scarce here. He'd only see 1 or 2 a year.
The difference today is we're seeing so many more sevengill sharks that it's kind of phenomenal.
And intimidating. Watkins says the sharks effortlessly slide through the water on the ocean floor. They're silent, they're bold, and they're big.
The sevengills, they won't move out of the way for anybody. They'll cruise right up to you, right around you.
An 11-foot shark gets Watkins' adrenaline pumping. He regularly dives at La Jolla Cove, hoping for a close-up look at a creature that is usually the largest predator in local waters. For some divers, it's an irresistible pull. This is a very picturesque scene. It's attractive to people, but it's what you don't see underneath the water that is attractive to the sharks.
These sharks tend to like kelp forests, bays, fairly shallow water.
Marine biologist John Hyde says there is plenty of food here. The larger sharks feed on seals and sea lions, and both of those animals are common at the cove. Hyde says the sharks thrive in near-shore areas from Alaska to the tip of Baja California. But until recently, sightings have been infrequent.
Their dorsal fin is very far back on their back, so they don't look like your typical shark, where most sharks have a dorsal fin about mid-body. These are further back towards the tail, so they look a lot more prehistoric with this long tail, kind of weirdly placed dorsal fin.
Hyde doesn't consider sevengills a threat to people. They haven't bitten anyone in San Diego waters. But he says they are big and are aggressive if provoked. He isn't sure if the local population of sevengills is up or if divers are better at finding them.
So we're not sure if there's a change in effort, more people with cameras, more people looking for these sharks that's causing us to hear about them more often, or whether there actually are more. I think it's a combination of both.
Michael Baer had his own close encounter while diving with a friend off Point Loma.
I looked over, and all of a sudden, this magnificent 9-foot sevengill swam right between us. I mean, it was just like that, like 2 feet away. I could have reached out and touched it.
Baer hopes to find out more about sevengill sharks. He set up a web page and is urging local divers to upload pictures, information about encounters, and videos.
This is a female sevengill taken in very shallow water a couple years ago off of Point Loma. And as you can see, she came very close to the divers.
Baer considers himself a citizen scientist. He's diligently collecting information in an effort to understand the species.
Broad-nosed sevengill shark.
Baer would like to know how many sevengill sharks live here, and he's interested in identifying the sevengills who've been photographed and filmed.
We hope in the years coming to be able to identify individual sevengill sharks with the unique freckling pattern on their bodies.
Pattern recognition software might help with that. Meanwhile, Baer continues to collect, document, and organize the underwater encounters.
And as you can see, they're very unperturbed by divers. They just keep doing their thing. They just cruise by. That's a close encounter. That is a very close encounter. That's a male.
So far, he's gathered 50 videos and more than 150 photos. He's hoping to spark interest in the local marine research community so more will be known about a prehistoric creature that is thriving in San Diego's nearshore habitat. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
Statistician Nate Silver made national headlines when he accurately predicted the outcomes of the presidential election in all 50 states. But very few dare to forecast the outcome of federal legislation, especially one as controversial as the immigration reform bill. But one local political science professor took up the challenge. Joining me is UC San Diego Assistant Professor Tom Wong. You took up this challenge, Tom, and you've done some pretty interesting work. Now, your formula predicts if the vote was today, the Senate Comprehensive Immigration Reform Bill would fail by 15 votes. That's pretty detailed. How do you come up with that?
Yeah, so I am modeling all past immigration votes and trying to figure out what explains the yeses and the nos. And taking all of that information, I can identify those things that matter for how legislators vote, and then use that information to think about how all 535 current members of Congress are likely to vote.
Yes, and that was talking about the House. And so you've developed this model which predicts a better outcome in the Senate. Tell us about that.
Yes, so for the Senate, we're talking about 67 to 71 potential yes votes on a bill with a path to citizenship.
Okay, and you made this sort of a really interesting graphic that we're looking at here with all the greens. What does that represent? The greens, the grays, and the reds?
So the greens represent the yes votes, but because the model can actually give us some idea of the uncertainty of the prediction, then we can actually identify those legislators who may be on the fence. And so greens are solid yes votes. Those grays are leaning one way or another, and those reds are definitely no.
And why are the grays important?
Well, the grays are important because the organizations who are working on immigration reform on the ground now, they're trying to figure out who to potentially lobby in order to change their opinion, so to move from a potential no to a yes vote. And so being able to identify those who are on the fence among a 535 member Congress, it's incredibly important for advocacy on the ground.
Have you been able to test these models, or do you have to wait for the vote to see if your model's accurate?
So the first step is the math of the model. The second step is to actually check how accurate the model performs. And so in the House, we can actually run a series of different diagnostics and checks to see whether or not the model actually reflects reality. And so for the House, there's a 94% accurately 94% of votes are accurately predicted. And for the Senate, we're talking about 90% of votes being accurately predicted. And so we know that the model is good. Will it actually sort of work in terms of the vote that's yet to happen? Who knows? But I think it points us in that direction.
Okay. What does your model show as far as San Diego's congressional delegation in voting for or against the bill?
So Susan Davis, Juan Vargas, Scott Peters, they're all either sort of lean yes or solid yes. Somebody like Duncan Hunter, though, is in the solid no category. And to explain why, he has a voting record that is inconsistent with what the current immigration reform bill tries to do, specifically a path to citizenship for undocumented immigrants. And in the past, he has actually sponsored legislation to tighten border security and other immigration legislation that one would consider sort of anti-immigrant.
So this would be clearly valuable to people developing bills and trying to get bills passed. What do you hope to do as far as with the immigration reform bill with this information? Do you hope it'll lead to passing? How do you hope to use the information?
Yes, so what I'm doing right now is identifying for the House and the Senate all of those legislators who are on the fence, and then digging deeper into their states or districts to try to identify what types of pitches may be influential for those legislators to think about immigration reform as being in the best interest of their constituencies. And so, for example, there is a House representative right up the freeway, Gary Miller in Riverside and San Bernardino. His demographics suggest that he should be on board with immigration reform with a path to citizenship. But he has a voting record that is inconsistent with what the Senate bill is trying to do. And so it's about sort of identifying those individuals who can potentially be influenced from voting no to voting yes.
Are you going to try to use this to sort of try to influence or enlighten people who are on the fence?
I don't have that capacity. Those organizations who are doing the hard work on the ground of trying to influence and change minds, they're the ones who are going to make this happen. The data and the analysis that I do just points the way.
All right, we will certainly be following up on this. Tom Wong, thanks so much for talking with us.
Thank you.
It's been 2 years in the making, and now San Diego's Vietnamese community has finally got the recognition it's been asking for. Speak City Heights reporter Megan Burks joins us in the newsroom with more on the City Council's big decision on the Little Saigon district. Megan, what did the City Council vote on today?
The Council unanimously approved a motion to officially designate El Cajon Boulevard between Euclid and Highland the Little Saigon district. The area is the center of San Diego's Vietnamese community with restaurants, supermarkets, and doctors' offices owned by Vietnamese families. The designation is more symbolic than economic. This is not a business improvement district that draws tax dollars, but leaders in the community say it will help unite residents and boost business.
Well, speaking of uniting, how was the community reaction today?
I found members of the Little Saigon Foundation celebrating over pho at restaurants in the district this afternoon. I spoke with the foundation's co-founder, Frank Vung.
The hard work is behind us in terms of getting the designation. But the new hard work is the revitalization work, the community building, the community organizing.
Megan, what's the sense of when this new work will begin?
Well, SANDAG awarded the El Cajon Boulevard Business Improvement Association about $200,000 last month to plan for sidewalk improvements. So the opportunity for revitalization is really very real. The district will also come together for its annual Lantern Festival, July 19th to 21st.
All right, Megan Burks, thanks so much. Right-brained engineering students are exercising their left brains in a new swing dance class at Northwestern University. Lee Powell of the Associated Press shows us some of their moves.
When you think of all that engineers have created, the Golden Gate Bridge, the Hoover Dam, the space station, and doing it without Billy Siegenfeld's class.
You see what I'm doing? Swing out!
Who knows what aspiring engineers at Northwestern University will craft
outside
after picking up swing.
Boom, zig, bop, bop.
I think that there were moments probably when the dean was kind of wondering, is this really what we should be doing? But I think he's really, embraced it.
Right-brained students using some of their left brains and feet.
I'm taking calculus and physics and classes like that, but This really lets me break out of my engineering shell and interact with people in a completely different way.
The class is called Whole Body Thinking. Dancing, yes.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
To do swing dancing means letting go. It means letting go of your weight, feeling that you can bounce and groove around. And I would say that the engineers, of course, have a problem doing that sometimes.
Where's that swing bounce?
But the lessons here also apply to life.
It's really interesting to see how much better the communication happens each week and how much better we connect and share the weight and share the rhythm and like develop the dance that way.
She goes, huh?
Things don't always go according to plan. So if you're in the leadership position, what do? So you really have to be able to think on your feet.
And 1.
The minds of engineers.
That's right.
Tackling a new way of thinking.
Keep cool, baby.
One step at a time. Lee Powell, The Associated Press.
Good.
Hello. I want to tell you a little bit about the investment KPBS has made in bringing you the news. From investigations into the Port of San Diego, Whooping Cough, San Diego Hospice, San Onofre, and North County Transit, our news team in association with iNewsSource is proving time and again that we don't stop after day one. We follow the issues that matter to our citizens and keep you up to date on the new developments. In order to achieve this, KPBS has invested in growing our news team on all platforms. You can access KPBS News anytime and anywhere you want. But we couldn't make any of this investment without your support. Become a member today and consider yourself part of the KPBS team. Thanks.
And for more of tonight's news stories, download our KPBS app or go to our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thank you again for joining us and have a great night.